All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Melanie McNair. Um, the first novel is an act of faith and a test of endurance. And to land on this stage tonight, these three writers persisted through doubt, indecision, and an unknown number of experiences with feedback and revisions, and feedback and revisions, and revisions, and also more revisions. All three of our authors invite us into questions of belonging, community, and identity, and all the ways those three essential human needs come into conflict both internally and externally. These are stories that break new ground, and at the risk of sounding a little schmaltzy, they break your hearts open too. Please welcome Denne Michele Norris, author of When the Harvest Comes, Doug Jones, author of the Fantasies of Future Things, Jon Hickey, author of Big Chief, and our moderator extraordinaire, De'Shawn Charles Winslow, winner of the 2019 Center for Fiction First Novel Prize.
Good evening, testing. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming. I would like to first thank the Center for Fiction for all the support they are showing these three writers, these new debut writers, but also the support they have shown me over the years. As Melanie just said, my first book came out in 2019, and I was fortunate enough to be the first Novel Prize winner for that year. But they also showed me an immense amount of support for my second novel. And I was like, oh, they gave me the second novel prize too. So I really love this place. And when Melanie asked me if I would do this event, at first I was like, no, I don't get on stages and talk to people. But you got to give it back, and especially when an organization shows you love, and so that's why I'm here tonight. So we're going to hear a little bit from each of these writers. I'm going to start with Doug. Before you go up to the podium, though, I'm going to ask you just one quick question. If you were in a bookstore and a customer was roaming and did not know that it was your book on the table right in front of them, and they said, "Oh, what should I read next?" And you said, "Okay, this book." Your book? How would you pitch it to them?
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, great. Love, Sex, and Real Estate. Right? All the things that, we all love to talk about, particularly here in New York. The real estate market is a point of conversation and gentrification and all that good stuff. So, yeah, that's how I describe it.
All right. Will you read for us for a couple of minutes?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. And I would also like to give thanks to this fabulous place and the support that Center for Fiction gives all of us as writers and everything else. So I'm going to read a little bit for you from both sections. There are two main characters. One is Jacob, and the other one is Daniel. And so I'm just going to read a little bit from each one of those sections. Jacob grew up believing Atlanta was a black Disneyland, a mystical, magical fairyland where black people lived in a different America. It was on every page he read about Atlanta in Black Enterprise. Stories in ebony about the big peach of the South read like love letters to the city. The summers Jacob spent there visiting his grandmother were proof of Atlanta's special enchantment. Neighborhoods like Cascade Heights, Collier Heights, and Loch Lomond Estates were the wizardry that made you forget Jim Crow ever existed. Atlanta was synonymous with Martin Luther King Jr. and Morehouse and Spelman. That was the city Jacob fell in love with, the city to which he declared his undying allegiance. That was the city he knew before the Olympics, his baptism by fire. And now Daniel. It had been months since Mama's death, and Daniel took his time wrapping, boxing, discarding remnants of her life. Not that there was much worth saving, but he didn't want to miss any possible clues. Mama was always so secretive. The search exhausted him. The difference between how hard Mama worked and how sparsely they lived was humorous. Their little family lurched through existence from one moment to the next. Mama used to remark, God has disappointed me. Look at my life. That was Mama thinking backward, retracing moments, shuffling through memories, asking where she misstepped, ended up wrong. God has disappointed me. Of all the things Mama had wished for, the most she ever wanted was to sleep late on her one day off. In red-eyed delirium, she declared the night before, I'm gonna sleep late in the morning, don't bother me. Y'all take care of yourselves. And then she'd stumble off to bed where for a time she slept. If Lila and Marty were good and dutiful children, they would have kept quiet, allowed Mama to dream and languish in bed well past the break of dawn, to forget about waking up even when the sun dipped toward the western horizon, as still then to only toy with the idea of getting up. Thank you.
Same question, Mr. Hickey. How would you pitch your book to that person in the bookstore who's looking for their next read?
The struggle between power and the spirit on the American Indian reservation in modern times. Yeah.
Will you read to us?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Now that you asked, yeah. Thank you. Thanks everybody for being here. Can you hear me? I feel like I'm doing this giraffe sort of thing. This is the end of my tour, so this is the last of the voice. So, right. I was going to read from the very, very beginning. The season's first shiver comes on Thanksgiving morning, 5 days before the election. It's a passing shudder when I leave for work and see the dead leaves and pine needles standing defiantly through the soft snow that blankets the Passage Rouge Indian Reservation. The shudder becomes a shake as I scrape the frost glaze off my windshield and fumble with my car keys. I try to keep it together when I drive through what's left of the old village, where my grandparents and ancestors once survived the harsh winters. But when I pass the blind corner outside the Chippewa Super, where 10 years ago my mother eased her car onto Highway 92 into the path of 4 high school kids with a handle of E&J brandy and a stolen 1994 Pontiac Grand Prix, the shiver is chattering my teeth together. But then it's gone, and I'm standing in the parking lot looking up at the log cabin facade of the Golden Eagle Casino and Resort, briefcase in hand, confused and thinking of a question my mother might have asked me had she lived to see this. Mitch Caddo, what exactly are you doing here? I'm 30 years old, the youngest ever tribal operations director for the Passage Rouge Nation of Lake Superior, Anishinaabe, a tribe of about 5,000 enrolled members. Our reservation is in the North Woods of Wisconsin, nestled within a confluence of picturesque lakes and lush forest that has drawn the Shemokemanog, the whites, and their money for more than 3 centuries. We're not huge like the Navajo Nation, but we're bigger than our neighbors in Bad River and Menominee, and we have federal recognition and a sovereign constitutional government. Its bureaucracy, legal, business development, education, safety, enrollment, health and family services, et al., answers to me. And I'm also the chief operations officer of Passage Rouge Golden Eagle Enterprises, the limited liability corporation that manages the day-to-day operations at the Golden Eagle, the economic center of the reservation that rakes in $25 million a year, home of the loosest slots in the state. I'm the suit and tie, the short haircut, the white passing face of Passage Rouge when we have business with the Shemokemanog. On the top floor of the Golden Eagle, though, inside the Migazi Suite, presides the man I put up there just 2 years ago, Mac Beck, tribal president. While I take meetings with the state reps looking for outfield chatter for whatever Indian country bills they're moving through the legislature, or knuckle down with the governor's office to discuss the compacts regulating our gaming operations, Mac Beck is the name at the top of the ticket, the Ursine face smiling from the billboards and campaign signs staked along the highway. He represented us in the intertribal delegation to D.C., where he grip and grinned with the president in the East Room of the White House, while I stayed in Passage Rouge for budget meetings, steering and development meetings, and the granular minutiae that Mac Beck can't be bothered with. He's ceremonial in all senses of the word. He is the look, I'm the substance. Does the unequal workload make me bitter? Not in the least. I'm a pragmatist. I'm too much of an outsider, a suburban Indian to pull enough Passage Rouge votes to get anywhere near the council. Mac doesn't have that problem. He looks the part, he says the right words. Neither of us got here alone, and together we wield power not normally afforded to kids like us. But what good is that power if you can't keep it? That's the other part of my job. Over the last 3 months, I've handed the bulk of my duties to the ancient order of aunties who run the tribal government, so I can figure out how to get Mac reelected to another 2-year term. In less than a week, the people of Passage Rouge will come down to the William R. Paulson Tribal Government Center on Peace Pipe Road to cast ballots for tribal council and president. Our election is too small for anything resembling scientific polling, but if you take the angry, misspelled all caps posts on Facebook and the picketers loitering outside the government center as indicators of how our campaign is going, you might come to the reasonable conclusion that the president's reelection prospects are in trouble, or in the words of our great orator in chief, straight up fucked. Is this the source of this morning's shiver, the very real prospect of defeat? Nobody thinks that's fun. And Fall Guy is the unwritten job description of operations director. I take the blame when everything goes wrong. His failure is my failure, and that's the way it's been from the jump. But as I get myself correct in the lobby of the Eagle and swipe at the permanent sleeplessness in my reddened eyes, I suspect this November shiver is bigger than just next week's election. It's an existential shiver. After all the sacrifices I've made, people I've disappointed, laws we may have broken, is this all there is? Just what did I trade in my meager decency for? There we go.
Den, what's your pitch?
I would say a queer love story for the ages complicated by daddy issues.
I was just going to say, you better mention Daddy in there.
Gotta mention daddy.
Will you read for us, please?
I would be thrilled. Is this the right one? This one? This one. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here. I'll give you just a little bit of context. So, as I mentioned, this novel is a love story between two characters, Davis, who's 25 years old, Black, very effeminate, and his fiance, Everett, who's late 30s, white, very wealthy, very masculine. And the novel begins on the morning of their wedding day. And Davis, who's a professional violist, has promised Everett that he would refrain from playing the viola during the week of their wedding. For Davis, scales and arpeggios are like daily meditation. He can quiet his mind, turn his attention to observing, which is different from thinking. The stillness of his body, contrasted with the quick dexterity of his fingers, has a way of calming him, bringing steadiness. Davis had tried explaining this on their second date. Everett, who'd worn a deep blue button-down tucked neatly into gray flat front slacks, had laughed at the thought of playing scales every day. Don't you get bored of them? A question that normally might have hurt or offended Davis instead amused him. He doesn't know the way his eyes glinted having caught an errant ray from the restaurant's lighting. He doesn't know how his sudden smile, joyful yet slightly condescending, managed to capture the most tender sort of happiness that Everett had ever seen. What Davis does know, what he remembers, is how quickly he shook his head, how he leaned forward and really looked Everett in the eye. His boldness in that moment still delights him. He almost knocked his fork to the ground as he tried to explain the joy of scales, the beauty in setting aside time every day to go back to the beginning, to lose yourself in rote practice. Think of it like this. On a playground, you've got your slide, your tire swing, your seesaw, your jungle gym. They're bolted to the ground, they never move. One day, I slide down the slide, then I run over to the tire swing, sit on top of it, and swing around in big, lopsided circles. Then I climb into the jungle gym where I crawl through the yellow plastic tube, but not the red plastic tube with the right angle, because I want to climb down the mini ropes course, and the red tube doesn't lead to that. Then, I'll run over to the seesaw and ride that with my friend. The next day, I'll start with the tire swing, but I'll turn it sideways so I can slide my legs through the hole in the middle and spin round and round like a top, rather than sitting on top of it swinging in lopsided circles. And then, I'll go to the seesaw, but this time, I'll sit on the other side so I can face the street instead of the school parking lot. I'll chase my friend up the giant slide because I'm not feeling gravity that day. And when I end at the jungle gym, I'll climb up the ropes course and walk the plank backward until I end up in the pirates' quarters. That's where I can steer the ship and look out over the rest of the playground. Do you see what I'm getting at? Before Everett could respond, Davis kept going. Every day, I have to play on that playground because it's the only playground my school has. That's the equipment. That's what I've got. But am I running around solo? Or is it a giant game of TV tag? Am I running up the slide or sliding down it? Everything about how I use the playground is completely up to me. Nobody gets to tell me what to do. In the constraints, in the limitations of the playground, I find my freedom. Scales and arpeggios are the same way. I know the notes and they never change, so I have to get creative. Do I slur my F minor 3-octave scale in triplets going up and staccato and square eighth notes going down? Am I solo pianissimo in my A minor arpeggio today, or am I mezzo forte? Do I spiccato the bow in G major because it's a joyful key, and then go legato and molto adagio in F minor because it's dramatic, and I'm playing Brahms in a recital that night? Davis sat back then, noticing that Everett's eyes had never strayed from his. It's very different from when I'm learning a piece, Everett. Scales and arpeggios, that's the playground. That's where I get to run and play and jump and be free. Wow, Everett said. You really took that metaphor and ran with it. Davis smiled and shrugged, suddenly bashful. Did I? Everett narrowed his eyes, but he smiled too as he did it. You've said all that before. Davis laughed. Swear to God, I came up with it on the spot. Davis watched Everett, watching him as he crossed his legs, sat back and brought his martini to his lips. They nearly closed the restaurant, and when the check came and Davis reached for it and Everett reached faster, Davis said, "But I asked you out." And Everett, with his big green eyes, glanced up as he pulled a credit card from his wallet and said nothing. When Davis started to pull his own credit card from his satchel, Everett, still staring, the movement barely perceptible, shook his head. Davis felt compelled to set the satchel down, and when he did, Everett smiled. Only then did Davis glance at his dessert plate, which still held a few bites of cinnamon apple pie. I don't even like pie, but this is so good. He sliced himself a small bite, speared it with his fork, and ate it. Then he looked at Everett again. You seem like a man of few words. He sliced another bite. Why do you say that? There was something mysterious in Everett's voice. You've been so quiet tonight. The waiter came and silently collected the check and the credit card, all the while Everett's gaze went uninterrupted. That's more about you than it is about me. Are you saying I talk too much? Everett grinned. No, not at all. When Davis said nothing, Everett continued. I like how much you talk. I like your voice. He tilted his head to the side. So, I listen. But I promise I'm not. He made air quotes. A man of few words. He blinked. I'm just a man. And then, after another few moments of silence, why? What are you thinking about? Davis closed his eyes and bit his lip. He paused, pensive. I don't think I know what that feels like. What feels like? The waiter returned, handing Everett the receipt and his credit card, smiling at them both, thanking one, then the other. Through all of this, Everett never moved his gaze from Davis. Davis leaned in close as Everett picked up the pen. To be like, I'm just a man. What does that feel like? Everett shrugged and furrowed his brow. He glanced down to sign the check. It doesn't feel like anything, really. It's just, I don't know. It just is. Thank you.
Thank you, all three of you, for those readings. So my first question, I have a lot of questions because you all don't get to ask any tonight. So I have a lot. I'll start with Doug. Doug, when did you get the idea for Fantasies? And I like to abbreviate titles, by the way. When did you get the idea for Fantasies? And I would say from the time you started writing till the time you sent it to an agent, how many months, years passed?
This is quite a long story. The book was written in a series of starts and stops over the last 30 years. So it just took me 30 years to become an overnight success. But it was fueled. There are pieces of it that have survived from the very first time pen touched the paper. And then as I gained experience, as I gained knowledge, as I gained fortitude as a writer, then it evolved. The story evolved and crafted. A lot of it was fueled by my experience working in economic development. I have friends here who are from the Brooklyn Chamber and from the Economic Development Corporation of New York City. And so there's a lot of that goes into the politics and business and the movement of real estate and how real estate touches all of our lives. And so as I gained more experience and more of a grip as to that happening, that went into the book as well.
I could tell that I was like, this is more than research. This is experience. This is someone who knows the business of real estate and how it impacts people. I
Yeah.
could tell. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. John, same question. When did you get the idea and when did you, and how long did it take you? You didn't tell us. Yes, you did. You said 30 years. Okay.
I was about to say, it took a long time for me too, but 30 years, wow. Congratulations, it's really incredible. It took me about 9 years, and the first pages probably were written about 2016. I don't know what was going on in the world in 2016, elections-wise, things happening. And there was the circus of politics happening. It hadn't curdled into something serious and dark. Like it was just sort of a show, and it reminded me of watching how some tribes conduct their elections and their politics and how they resembled each other. But it also coincided with the birth of my son, that and realizing, I live in San Francisco, and I realized that even he is being, he's a citizen of the nation, the Lac du Flambeau band of Ojibwe, that he might not have the same connection with the place that I do, just because we don't live close enough to visit as often. And I had that sinking feeling that we were watching the end result of termination policy of the previous century. That this was an outcome that was determined, and made me afraid a little bit. And something about those two things fused into this. Because I'd been writing around it for a few years, but it didn't really crystallize until those things sort of fell into place. So it took about 5 years to come up with a draft that was worth showing to my agent, and it was a very long draft, and I had to cut it in two basically, and restructure it. So then it took another 4 years or so to end up with this. Yeah.
Den.
Okay, so I started this book in the summer of 2011 when I was in between my 2 years in my MFA program, which was Sarah Lawrence. Shout out to Sarah Lawrence if anyone knows it. And it sort of started as an exercise. I had, done my first year, and I would write these stories, and I would get pretty positive feedback on them, and I would only do very light edits and revision on them, enough to sort of get the grade, and then I would just go on to the next story. And after a year of this, which really is not that long of a time, but to me as a 24-year-old at the time, it seemed like a lot of time to have wasted. And I just was concerned. I was like, how am I ever going to actually write something worth reading, something that could be published, if I don't have the wherewithal to keep working on it, to revise and do the kind of work that I need to do to write something that's worthy of a reader's attention. And so, and I had gone through some things that year. My father had died about a month into the program very suddenly. And so I was writing in this haze, and it was all connected. And I decided over the summer to give myself an exercise to try to write something that looked very much like autofiction, that looked very much like my life and my lived experience. And my suspicion was that if I could free myself of feeling any obligation to convince a reader of anything in the books or projects, truth or accuracy or legitimacy, because I knew it to be true, then I could take all of that energy and put it into writing something that was emotionally true and resonant and meant enough to me for me to invest time in it. And I mean, I maybe wrote 20 pages over the summer, but I came back to school and I said to my thesis advisor, I think this is why I'm a writer. Like, I think it's to write this thing and things that speak to it in many ways. And so I think it had been 11 years when my agent and I sent it to publishers, and then 2.5 to 3 of the sort of editorial process and promotion and all of that. Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like it, does it? It doesn't feel, this question is following, it doesn't feel like 30 years probably. Once you reach the point, if
It certainly felt like 30 years. Just the process of sending work. I'm sure there are a bunch of writers in the room. And so the process of sending your work out, getting a lot of no's, but knowing in your gut that what you have is worthwhile and crafting. I have to say that I got beautiful rejection letters, and they were the sort of rejection letters that I could actually sit down and look at the work and be like, maybe I can cull a little bit more here. And when I finally got over the hump, my editor, Jon Israel at Simon and Schuster, he said one of the things that happened when I was writing back in those early days is that there was not an infrastructure within publishing to support what I was writing about. These small, intimate, detailed stories about Black gay men and their lives. That really didn't exist, and everything else. And it's a very different time within publishing right now, which feels good. Yeah.
there were like 2 people doing it, like Elin Harris and
James L. Hardy.
Yes, like 2 people.
And Elin Harris wasn't. I mean, he wasn't really. I mean, we could talk about what he was writing, but he was really writing books that were geared towards Black women.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was just going to say he wasn't considered a queer writer at the
Right.
time. Right. Thank you. Yeah. You could pass the mic to John, because I'm going to, along the lines of the rejections and stuff. How did you? You don't have to give us a number. I tell people all the time, I stopped counting at 30. But how did you handle that? Were you prepared for the rejections that inevitably come?
I don't know, because I think I held on to it for such a long time that I started answering that question in my head, and I realized that it would make me sound very, very bad, because I don't think we got rejections. You know, but that was because, like I said, we held on to it for such a long time, and that we you know, polished it. And I'd written novels before. I'd written, you know, a few different novels, and you know, I did the agent thing back in, you know, 2011, around that time. And I don't think that the novels that I was working on were anywhere close to what I wanted to write about. And I don't know if I was writing them for the wrong reasons, or, you know, if I was just trying to get a novel to just write a novel. I think that what was scary about it was that, you know, my heart and soul were not getting into these projects, and it was showing, and it was scary because it was showing. You know, I couldn't fake it. So when this one came along, and when I got to a certain point of completion with it, you know, I sent it off to an agent who I'd known for a little while, my wonderful agent, Michelle Brower. Woo! All right. And like I said, we'd known each other a little by that point. So she read it, loved it, and we worked on it together. And then when we went on submission for it, we were fortunate enough to have a healthy amount of interest. So the thing went really fast, and I think it was a little misleading how fast it was, because the actual thing took, you know, just a couple of weeks. Yeah. But, you know, that sort of covers over the many years of trying. Yeah.
Den.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a little bit more of a similar trajectory to John, I would say. I mean, first of all, I, f- I feel like no one is harder on me in my writing than me. It just, so rejections that I've gotten over the years have not really bothered me. I also it took me a long time to think I was writing anything that was worthy of publication. So I was pretty lucky in that pretty quickly after I started submitting work to be published, it was getting accepted. Um, but I would say that one of the problems in my approach for so long is that I held so much of it so close to the vest for so long that I probably could have moved faster if I had been more willing to show more writers more of it over the years. Because when I did start doing that towards the end, as I was finishing the book, I was able to move just a lot faster. And so that's one of the things that I've learned sort of from the process, is to be a little more trusting and open earlier. But you know, it was a similar thing with my agent. I was lucky enough to have an excerpt of this published in a wonderful anthology called Everyday People, The Color of Life, edited by Jen Baker. And that anthology ended up on the desks of several book editors. And so I heard they reached out to me and they're like, "Are you working on a novel?" And I said, "In fact, I am. In fact, that was part of the novel." And so they were curious to see pages. And so at that moment, I had a few wonderful mentors who were like, "Get an agent now." And so I had been in contact with a few agents. I let them know that this was, because I had always been like, I'm finishing the book. Like, I don't want an agent until I finish the book, because, you know, that's what they trained us to do in my MFA program. And I like to follow the rules and go about the process as I'm told to go about the process, even though some of my mentors were like, "You're okay. Like, you don't need to wait." And I was like, "I need to wait." Anyway, at that point, I was like, I guess I can't wait. And so I connected with Robert, my agent, through a friend, and I met with each agent and I went to breakfast with him. And I really wasn't planning on signing with him. I just wanted a free meal. I was just like, I will let this white man feed me. Like, like absolutely. But I thought I was going to work with another agent. And when I met him, I just loved him. And I just was like, it was a gut feeling. And I said, this is the person. And so that was it. And he waited for 4 years. He didn't see a draft of the whole thing until I sent it to him in October of 2022. And he read it very quickly over the weekend. And I edited it in a week and sent it to him again. And then 5 days later, we sent it to publishers and it sold pretty quickly. But it was then a lot of the work began. I did some really serious, intensive revisions of some parts of the book over that time.
Something I admire about all three of you is that you really, really took your time. You really did. I did not take my time, and that's why I got 3,800 rejections. Do any of you have writing rituals? I'll start with you this time. Do you have a thing that has to be right when you sit down at your desk?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can look at me and tell I'm high maintenance. Whether I'm maintaining myself or someone else is maintaining me. Um, I have lived and worked through both circumstances. First of all, I have to have a desk. I have to have a desk to sit at. I refuse to write if I can't sit at a desk. Ideally, the biggest desk possible. In that way, spread, yes, spread out. When I went to McDowell, I literally told them, I was like, I want the biggest desk possible. It's the only I need the biggest desk, and I need a warm studio, because if I'm cold, I'm gonna be awful. And I got what I asked for. So I need a big desk. I sometimes, if I'm particularly anxious, I will light a candle. I like to have either coffee or a glass of wine, and also a giant thing of water, because hydration. And I always play music when I'm writing fiction, always. And what happens usually is I will find a piece of music at somewhere else in my life, and I will hear it, and it'll immediately trigger a certain emotion that I might be thinking about for the work. And I might start like seeing a setting or a weather event or something. And I will find out what that music is and put it on a playlist on Spotify. And if that's the music I choose for any writing session or whatever, I usually will put it on repeat. And it might be on repeat for 30 minutes. It might be on repeat for 3 hours. It might be on repeat for 6 months. As long as it's serving the purpose, I'm playing it and trying to pull from it what I need.
John, any rituals while you're writing?
That's where we differ about the desks. I think the only maybe strange thing about me, well, there's lots of strange things about me, I suppose. I, um, I write on the floor. I just like lay on the floor. I don't know, and I don't know. Really strange. I don't know. I can't sit at a desk. I don't know for whatever reason, and I create a little nest. This is a really strange venue for this, by the way. I just realized, looking out upon you, this is my inner sanctum. I have like a blanket and a pillow, and I just lay on the floor, and sometimes I nap, and to get into the dream space of fiction, right? Not because I'm tired all the time with the kids. Um, and I don't do music for some reason. Like music is just it's too distracting for me. I tend to really like to actively listen to music, and if I hear it while I'm trying to do something else, I feel irritated.
And you
This
type
is
the
my artist.
lyrics.
Yeah, this is my artist. In my cozy little nest of blankets and stuff like that. Yeah, very. So that's my precious routine.
Doug, any rituals?
I don't know if I have a ritual, but I've tried sitting at a desk, and it depends on where I am in the writing. Typically, well, I write longhand, first of all. It's all longhand. It goes into the computer, and then editing is printed out and everything else. But I write longhand, and I write in absolute silence. I cannot hear any noise or music or anything like that. It's that it I agree, it's very distracting. I need to hear the words. I need to hear the rhythm of the words. I need to feel the texture of them. I think that as fiction writers, there's a certain there's a certain poetry in fiction. In poetry, there's a certain prose, and you have to hear that. You have to be able to hear that. And if music is playing for me in the background, I can't really hear that. Can't really feel it. Um, Usually, I will say that the longhand writing happens on yellow 8.5 by 11 pages and everything else. And I'm writing all over the page and in the margins and everything else. And then it goes into the computer, and I can kind of track where I'm going and everything else. I've just fallen in love with um, a journal, Paper Republic. They have these fantastic journals, and so and you can order, you know, and have these really wonderful um, books, filler pages, and you can write on them. The paper is absolutely fantastic. Like you can write on it, and you just feel the ink coming out of the pen onto the page, and it just flows. It's beautiful, you know. So I've been discovering that, but I just a ritual. So I might move between. I have a little breakfast front and then in my office I have a little desk, and sometimes I move between those two, and it depends on where I am. And I don't like it to be cold either. I get I get really irritable if it's cold. So so yeah, so that's my yeah. I just kind of pay attention to what's going through my head, And the dream space is important too. Like when I go to sleep, I always have paper and pen next to the bed because the ancestors might tap on you and you might wake up, and whatever that conflict is that you were working out, you might work it out in your sleep, and they're tapping you to wake up 4 o'clock in the morning, and you write it out. Yeah. And then later on, you can make it pretty and smooth and everything else. Yeah.
John, you mentioned something that leads right into my next question. You mentioned having children. And so my next question to all of you is as you were writing this book, what was your life like away from the desk? And John, I'll start with you.
What was it like away from the desk?
What do you have going on? You have children.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Stuff.
I have two boys. One is 9, is going to be 9, and the other is going to be 3. And I feel like, my life was filled with that. That was my job. My second job is being the stay-at-home dad, especially with the first one. And it's just a lot of days where the only other human you're talking to is a toddler, and then your language skills kind of start to devolve, and the sorts of literature that you're reading tends to lower a few grade levels, and the stories and the narratives tend to be a little bit simpler, I think, and maybe that was helpful in a way. In a craft sort of thing, but I think that would be kind of dressing it up. I don't know if it was really all that helpful. It takes time. I mean, it takes a lot of time and effort and emotional toll. To be the one person doing that. My wife works regular people hours. Yeah, with a regular person job, and which of course I respect, and that keeps food on the table and all that sort of thing. Um, but yeah, that it did probably add a couple of years, to the final product. But I wouldn't give them back. Of course, they're my kids. I love my children so much. They're even being pummeled awake at 7 o'clock in the morning. It's a wonderful thing. But yeah, I would not trade that time, for expediency, I suppose. So
Den, what about you? What was life like as you were writing? What was life like outside, away from the large desk?
I mean, I was 25 when I started this novel, so it was mess. It was mess. When I moved to the city after Sarah Lawrence, I think it was when the second season of Girls came out. And I was working part-time at the Juilliard School as an admin assistant, and I was also working on weekends at a Lush Fresh Handmade Cosmetics at Union Square. And combined, those two jobs paid me maybe $25,000 over the course of that first year. And I was also trying to get personal assistant gigs when I could. So my life was all across the process of writing this book was working my way up from that, learning how to pay a bill on time, learning how to use the subway, learning how to set up utilities when you move, like be an adult. Building friendships, dating, not dating and sometimes just skipping right to the good part. It was mess. It was mess. But I ended up developing a career in nonprofit youth development work because I had worked in student affairs at Sarah Lawrence, which got me into the job at Juilliard. And then the second year, I got a job at the Harlem Children's Zone on a team of incredible young writers who were doing really literacy intervention in their after-school programs. And a number of notable writers came from that, were on the team that I was on, including the poet Ricky Laurentis and Candace Elo and Kimon Felix and Safia El Hilo. We were all working together with these kids in Harlem. And so that's when I got a little stability. And then after that, I worked at a nonprofit called Figure Skating in Harlem, where I supported school access for girls in Harlem. And so I just had this whole other day job life, and I was slowly being able to make more money. And, I was never in a relationship so serious that I really had someone supporting me. So to a certain extent, the writing always had to be in the background. And I just had to do it when I could because, and I tell writers this all the time, how are you going to write your novel if you don't have a place to plug in your MacBook Air? Or enough money to keep the heat on so you're not freezing. So that's really, that's why that's a big part of why it took me so long. But I also wouldn't give it back. I think during that time I was also editing at journals, and I was publishing short stories, and I was becoming someone who people in the literary world knew a little bit, which was extraordinary. And then I did the podcast, Food for Thought, and that was, thank you. And that was amazing. And that helped in certain ways, but was also a distraction. So it was all mess, and I'm moving into a period in my life where everything is about creating the calm and the quiet and the peace that I need to hopefully work on my next novel a lot faster.
Doug.
I don't have a kid, I have a dog.
Okay. Same thing.
He requires a lot of time. He's probably the most spoiled dog. Yeah, it. I was busy living, you know. I would write when I could write, but you have to keep the lights on. Got to keep a roof over your head, clothes on your back, food in your belly. So I started working in housing and not-for-profit housing. When I moved, I finished Morehouse College, and then I moved up here in '96. I went to Columbia for my MFA, and I moved back home. In the house I grew up in, studio apartment in a brownstone in Bed-Stuy, and I started working in housing, not-for-profit housing first, and that led to the career in economic development. And when there was a little period when your friends are traveling, they go on these fabulous vacations, and you're like, damn, they're getting great apartments, damn, And so at some point, I decided that I was going to lean a little bit to the left and concentrate on living, grow up a little bit, buy a house, and do that. But I've missed the writing, and I've always stuck with it and stayed with it. And in buying a house, suddenly I bought a brownstone. I had rental income, so that took a little bit of the pressure off in terms of the day job and everything else. But I just kept plugging and plugging and plugging away at it. Find my agent. Haley is here somewhere, who's fabulous, and she connected me with Yadon after I got the work to where it needed to be. Yeah. So.
Final question, to be real quick. What is a piece of advice that you would like to offer to someone in the audience or in the audience or watching at home, who is working on their first novel right now? I'll start with you, Doug.
Don't give up. Do not give up. And if you feel it in your gut and you know it, you only need one yes. That's it. Do not give up. Work at your craft. Fill your sentences. Fill your story. Understand it. Lean into your experience. Have someone in your corner who loves you and loves your work. It's fine to have mentors in writing and everything else, but make sure you have someone who's going to give you good, loving, honest feedback. Emphasis on loving.
That was so good. And I agree with all of it 100%. And sort of building on that, I'm just going to say something that someone once told me: you have to want it. You've got to want it. For me, this was like my Olympics. I wanted it. I wanted it. And, you just, because life, there will be so many reasons to step away from the page, to step away from writing, to get discouraged and to get distracted. And so for me, above all else, I was like, I will die trying to publish this book. Like, if I need to. It was not a game. You have to want it.
I really suspect that my advice is no good. So I tell people just to do opposite of things, and I think that my advice is not really advice. It's more like just kind of a fact of life. Is that you have to develop this patience, and there's not really a thing that you can do about that. You can't go to a class to learn patience. It's just life. Life happens. And the way that I learned that was that I wrote a couple of books that didn't work and weren't getting out there, and I didn't die, and I inevitably went back to it. But it's just, I think it's one of those things like you can't do anything about that. Be patient, you know. It's just a natural thing that happens. But but maybe like learning to live to sit in that, you know, the discomfort of wanting it to happen so bad, like you're saying, um, but to just allow the time to pass, and do what you can in the moment. But
I think all three of you gave excellent advice, but I will say that patience piece, whoo, Jesus. Ooh, that patience piece. Because when you
it's
send
not
a
easy.
manuscript to an agent, most of the time they're getting 500 on the same day you sent yours, And you just gotta wait, man. You just gotta wait. Oh God, don't. Thank you all so much. Let's congratulate them.